Serious. People who waited until after marriage to have sex. How did your relationship go and how is your relationship now? Attention. Serious. Tag notice. Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. 1000x Yes, my husband and I have been together 11 years, 8 married, and though we didn't wait and weren't each other's firsts overall we were each other's firsts in other bedroom playtime ways. Marriage really is work and not always pretty. We entered this commitment knowing we are forging ahead as a team but we aren't one. We are still two people that are growing and learning together, which means we are going to handle life events differently, see situations differently, and even have different wants, goals. Communicating is a two-way street. You have to not only speak up but really listen to each other's wants/needs/problems. It is the only way to make sure this works. Sex is great and for some really important, but as time has gone on it's not and all be all part of our marriage either. My parents both waited, according to them, but I believe it. Neither of them were young. Mom late 20s, dad mid 30s. But they only dated for a year before getting engaged and then another before marrying. I think they both had a lot of body-related trauma, so it was probably a good idea that they waited. It mostly worked out. They've been married almost 30 years now and have 3 kids including myself. That being said, they were very strange and repressive to me about sex. I had a pretty high libido and began to have sexual thoughts, masturbate fairly young. And for a long time I felt guilty and disgusting because of it. I'm still a virgin at 27 myself, not by choice but because I didn't have romantic relationships. I'm in a committed long-distance relationship now and 100% want sex to be a part of it at some point. But I'm glad I didn't try to do something solely for the purpose of losing my virginity. I think that anyone who feels like waiting should. You can always change your mind, and virginity is kind of a social construct anyway. Your last sentence is pretty important to remember. Like, sex isn't just penis and vagina. If you're a guy who's fingered a girl, you've had sex. If you're a girl who has given a BJ, you've had sex. There's this massive pressure for people to have intercourse and it just isn't always enjoyable for some people. Like if you and your partner get each other off with your hands, mouth, then that's just the way you have sex, as long as you enjoy it. My husband was my first boyfriend. First kiss and first sex. We were together for 4 years before we got married and celebrated our 9th anniversary this July. We waited till marriage and we never regretted it. Of course it's not always sunshine and rainbows, but we do love each other very much and have 2 beautiful children together with a 3rd on the way. In the beginning we had to learn what the other one liked and disliked and how to communicate our wants and needs, but now it's just great, except for the dry spells now and then when the kids are sick or when life gets too busy and we are exhausted, but I think that's a regular issue for parents of little children. As someone with a high sex drive, the focus on no sex before marriage distracted us from bigger issues like general compatibility and whether we were sufficiently mature to handle marriage. A decade and a half and a bunch of kids later and we're still dealing with the repercussions of those decisions. A happy, healthy marriage is built from happy, healthy individuals. You need to understand and like yourself before you commit to dealing with someone else's baggage. You can't find yourself after you get married. This is the reason why I told an uber-conservative acquaintance to just fuck. I was like, go for it. She was about to hit 30 and still a virgin. I was thinking to myself as a woman, that you have to figure out your body in order to get any pleasure from sex with a man. Besides that, there was a certain what to call it, naive and even amateur way she spoke about men and her body. A lot of times, I was actually taken aback as to how a woman her age refused to call things by their anatomical name, or how she was so uneducated on taking care of her vagina in general. My parents waited. They got married too young, and they're still married. I imagine they will stay that way until they die, despite it not being a healthy relationship. Their attitudes about sex are gross, extremely misogynistic and repressed. I was not allowed to learn about sex in school. I grew up basically acting like a child sex assault victim. I don't know what you're looking for here, but your results are going to be tainted by religious attitudes towards marriage, sex and gender roles. Staying married doesn't mean the marriage is good. It is extremely common for people who wait to say their marriage is good even when it isn't, often tied to very misogynistic attitudes. Husband and I waited until after marriage. He was a virgin. I had a couple guilt-riddled encounters before. He was 22 years old. I was 20 when we got married. We've been together over 12 years now and have 2 beautiful children. I'm kinky AF and he indulges. He would sometimes look at soft porn when we were first married and felt guilty about it. Birth control seriously tanked my libido and his needs weren't being met. He stopped years ago and we fulfill any fantasies of each other's as they come up. We have a great relationship because before we got married, we agreed God was our first priority, then each other, then any children we may have. Anytime we're in a slump we'll dare challenge each other. Our latest one was have sex at least once a day for 30 days in a row. We're literally each other's favorite people on earth and we have hobbies that we share, and hobbies that complement, like, we both enjoy D&D, but he has no interest in reading and I don't enjoy console video games, but we like doing those activities next to each other. Anyway, hope this post helps someone in some way. Feel free to ask questions or clarification. I remember reading an article by a woman who waited for religious reasons. She said it felt like such a big part of her identity, and when she was getting married everyone saying a wedding night apostrophe made her feel like was losing something, and reinforced how it was a part of her. After the deed she felt worthless, but also realized sex wasn't a big deal and there was no real reason to wait, and she regretted waiting and considered it a toxic mentality to force on young women. I'd link it if I knew where I read it, but was an interesting perspective. My husband and I waited, initially for religious reasons and later for mental. For us, it ended up being the right thing, but I also was sexually assaulted and needed time to heal from that and go to therapy for vaginismus. I am very fortunate to have someone who was willing to wait and slowly transition into more intimate behaviors. For people who wait solely for religious reasons, learn your own body. Learn sex myths, that is hymen popping, that it should hurt your first time, etc. Learn anatomical structures. Learn about different types of birth controls and their side effects. Don't just expect to go in dry missionary style and expect everything to work out on your wedding night and have a kid 9 months later. Take the time to explore yourself and then your partner. Don't be afraid to guide them and communicate. You're going to get a lot more comments about successful relationships rather than failed relationships. People tend to be much more vocal when they feel strongly about something, so you will likely get a lot of folks saying to wait till marriage. Most people don't feel too strongly either way and prefer to just do it when the time feels right. Sex doesn't determine the outcome of a relationship, but it is a factor. You should get to know yourself as best you can in order to find the time that's best for you. Don't let others tell you what is right or wrong. This is a personal matter and thus should be a personal decision. Great. I don't think if I went back if I'd change it. Although my outlook isn't as conservative in general anymore, I don't know if I'd change much. Maybe we'd kiss a bit more. I was led to believe kissing would lead to sex, but turns out kissing isn't much of a turn on for me. Being with the guy for 10 years, married for 6, so I can't complain. We were both virgins and each other's first for basically everything. Looking back, I know we were perhaps a bit too uptight, but I got married feeling confident in front of my family, friends and God. It took us a while to figure sex out, but we have a mutually respectful and honest relationship, so we managed. He's a good dude, so I have nothing to complain about. Wouldn't change much if I could have. I saw my wedding and our dating years to be a process that involved family, community and church, but our honeymoon and moving away was to invest in just us. I wanted to treat my family and my family values with respect, as well as what I had grown up being taught about God. I'm proud of little me because I stayed true to myself and remained kind and respectful to my loved ones. After we got married, we moved away, figured ourselves out as a couple, and established our values apart from our families. This is so important, and I'm glad we did that too. As far as my romantic relationship goes, I don't have much in the way of regrets or desires for do-overs. In a serious relationship for 8 years. Then got married in '94. Yeah, we waited till after the wedding to be sexually intimate. Still together and happy, as in, holding hands all the time happy. Sexually, since that's what you asked about, the first 2 years had us finding out what each other liked or disliked. Likes, dislikes can change over time, but I guess if what turns you on is turning your partner on, you'll have less trouble than most in that department. My husband, 30M, and I, 28F, waited until marriage, and I would do it again. Dated 2.5 years, currently married 5 years. We are religious, so that played a part. But I loved waiting for other reasons, too. I felt like our relationship really grew on an emotional and spiritual level, and it helped us practice self-control, which I believe is a very important and healthy part of being an adult in various ways. For instance, budgeting, family planning, relationships, etc. The sex is great. It didn't matter that we both were virgins with no experience, because we didn't know what we didn't know, and learned together and practiced together. Lol. We also had no sexual baggage to bring into the relationship, which helped us explore each other freely without worrying. It was difficult at times, but I would 10/10 wait again. My husband and I waited 2 years before we did it on our wedding night. It was the best. I'm so glad we waited for each other. It made our wedding night more special and absolutely stellar. We made sure we were physically compatible before by making out regularly and being intimate both physically and mentally. Also, we made sure to talk about sex before getting married, and we're open about that. Both of us do it regularly now, and it's so much fun. No one to compare to, and we only fantasize about each other. It's like living in a dream. We both came from conservative, religious families that made a big deal about waiting, so we did. We started dating our senior year of high school and married at age 21. We just celebrated our 38th anniversary. Both of us agree that if we ever became single by divorce or death, the chances of either of us waiting for marriage to have sex again is pretty low. As for how we are doing today, we have occasional sex, but friendship and companionship is easily more important. I know I've always been faithful, and I assume the same about my wife, but maybe you never know. We didn't wait until marriage, but he was my worst decision I ever made was marrying him, because of the old school bullshit my parents shoved down my throat. He was horrible in the sack. The only time I got off was when I did it myself, and he hated that I'd have to get myself off after. Oh, and he cheated on me all the time. Also had a fetish for virgins. The second I moved out, a year and a half after the wedding, he was messaging my friends. Folks, if you are determined to wait until marriage, please don't. You're setting yourself up for an enormous quagmire. There's no promise you're sexually compatible. There's no promise your spouse isn't hiding shit. Apparently, my ex had a really massive porn addiction. I have nothing against porn, but he had a literal box of it and would blast it when I wouldn't put out, if I were sick, etc. You have no guarantee you won't be sexually abused by your spouse either. And yes, you absolutely can be raped by your spouse. Find yourself, find what you like, what works for you, learn boundaries to what you will tolerate. It protects you in the long run, even if it doesn't make the Sky Daddy doctrine happy. Being married 11 years in a couple of weeks, with 2 beautiful kids. However, I keep wishing I'd spent more time fooling around when I was younger. As much as I love my wife, our sex drives are way out of sync, and that often leaves me wondering what that kind of intimacy would have been like with other girls before she came along. Worth breaking up over? No. Although it's definitely been a strain at times. Worth being unfaithful. As tempted as some may be in this situation. As I said, I love her to pieces. She's my world. I just wish we were in better sync, and seeing others with healthy sex lives just makes me a little envious. Grass is greener and all that. Both waited until marriage, being together 13 years and counting. It's worked because we both agreed to communicate and make friends with change. Turns out, she had an abusive mom and I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. Our codependency is what saved us. We are healthily, well-adjusted, newly agnostic, and have a wonderful 6-year-old who won't be raised with the same conservative bull honky we grew up with. Side note, we got married young, 19 and 20. And everyone we knew that got married young in our friend group is either divorced or very unhappy. So be warned that the younger you are, the more you roll the dice with long-term relationship success. My husband was my first. He had a past. I enjoy our sex life. He says he does too. We have been married 28 years and together for 31. I waited because I wanted something that was special to us. To him, sex was casual. Neither of us judged the other. I have friends who have had several partners and are unhappy with their current sex life. One faked liking sex before marriage and her husband was disappointed and eventually they divorced. Another had a good sex life before, but after 2 kids and a mortgage, the stress has killed their sex life. He needs it as a relief and she hates it. Sex changes in a relationship over time. Having sex before marriage doesn't guarantee you will be compatible. Did we have a learning curve to figure out what we liked? Yes. But that would have happened even if we had sex before marriage. For us it worked because, like every other aspect of our marriage, we put effort into it. Honestly, we have more issues regarding cleaning the house than sex. We didn't wait, neither were each other's first. She is really sexually active and so am I, but when we thought sex was gonna be a problem for us, it kinda isn't because it's natural. Like, we treat it as part of life. Happens naturally sometimes every day of the week. We don't feel like having to talk about this. In the end, I guess you should live your own experiences and find what you really like. Even if you like your same gender. Both me and she had homo experiences in the past, and we talk openly about this and everything. She's my best friend and my wife. It's the best thing. My husband and I both waited. Our communication really had to develop because we didn't have a physical part of our relationship to rely on. We had to talk through every argument and find other ways to make it up to the other person. I feel like we learned a lot more about the non-sexual ways that make the other person feel cared for. I find that we lean more on those now than sex, especially being as busy as we are. It's greater and it's fun, but it's definitely not a main focus in our relationship. As for how it's going, we're actually expecting our first child in March. He's still my best friend and I love him more every day. It works really well most of the time, even with a fairly short dating period, but nothing is ever guaranteed for anyone. You have to ask the hard questions beforehand, and have the same religion, approach to finances, and lots of other things. The reason it works incredibly well is because both people are going and taking marriage and sex incredibly seriously. They aren't easy or flippant about it, and they usually go in agreeing that divorce is not on the table. If there is a problem, instead of jumping ship, they will dig in and go out of their way to work it out, excluding divorce or something big like head, of course. You should also ask your potential mate prior to proposing if there is medical stuff they have that you should know about, along with debt or past traumas, because you don't want to go into that blind. My husband and I waited and I'm so super glad we did. Our first time was not wholesome because I had vaginismus and didn't know it. Had we tried having sex before getting married, we probably would have broken up because yes, it went that poorly thanks to my undiagnosed condition. It took us a few months to figure out I had it, get diagnosed, and start treatment, but I'm glad it was something we could go through together without the fear of him leaving me over it. His patience and support made a big difference. Vaginismus is still problematic for me and likely will be for the rest of my life. However, we've made great progress and are expecting our first child. I wouldn't change a thing. 10/10 would wait again and wouldn't want to do it with anyone else.